I really enjoyed reading Choosing Simplicity. I had a chance to read it now, I think, a couple of times. The first time I read it, I think, when I first became interested in ordination. And the book is full of amazing wisdom and advice for those of us who aspire to ordain. Um, I wanted to highlight a specific story that really impacted me. Is as the book is titled, is a simple story, and yet it just has so much in it. But first, I wanted to say that when I first became interested in ordination and began to learn a little bit more about the status of women within the Buddhist hierarchy, I was a bit outraged and I was a bit angry. I thought it was unfair, just like probably most, if not all of you. And so I had two different reactions to this particular story. The first one was anger and indignation, and then I'll tell you about the second one. And so the story is about, it's Venerable Children talking about these issues at the beginning of the book, about this relationship or the status of nuns and women within the Buddhist structure, particularly the Tibetan Buddhist structure. And she was speaking about this with someone that Venerable Children called a highly esteemed abbess. And it was particularly about the issue of nuns who have been ordained for a long time, paying respect to even junior monks of one day of ordination. And so there was a conversation apparently going on between Venerable and this abbess about this. And I'm going to kind of read what it says, this particular portion that I am interested in. It says, once I raised the issue, meaning Venerable Children, once I raised the issue with a highly esteemed abbess, after she walked behind a junior monk in a procession. And this is speaking about the Taiwanese abbess, and this happened in Taiwan. And so the abbess, this highly esteemed abbess, responded, if I show him respect, he will learn to respect himself. Of course, in the beginning, it's like I was thinking, this is completely unfair. Here is a highly respected, a very senior master, Vinaya master, and she has to do this. I couldn't understand it. And then I started to think about it. I wanted to come to terms with what this meant, specifically because I was considering going into this structure, this monastic structure, and I wanted to arrive at some peace with that situation. One of the things that we notice when we look at these abbesses' reaction and how she's working with this particular issue is that she was not fixated in receiving respect. She was not bought into that as the end all be all of her ordination, of who she was or what she was presenting to the world. She was more interested in how she could benefit. She was not focused on herself. This was not a self-centered attitude for her. She was focused on others. That immediately sort of like makes me pause. Okay, my ordination, this something that I hold so precious, is really not about me. It's about others. And this is how this person that I admire, which I've come to meet in person, thank goodness, how she lives it. And so this then illuminated my own demands and expectations for respect. Right? As a woman, I expected people to respect me. And then there's a part of me that might have even demanded it. As a minority, I expected and may have even demanded respect. As a professional, as a customer. And what this brings me to also is that while I see or I saw that attitude in myself, I am also seeing it very vividly in the world at this point, where every group, every person, every someone demands respect. They, they shout for respect. Every person wants that or else. And unfortunately, the else in this phrase too often means violence, whether it's verbal or physical, and even in some painful situations. This attitude of respect me or else sometimes also leads to death. So I understand that this seed that I have, this attitude that I had, was the precursor or was the breeding ground for something that could be more serious, more damaging to self and others. And I could see how easy also it is to give in to the mind that says, I expect respect because I am older, because I'm more senior, more knowledgeable, more experienced, because I have suffered so much, or because I'm a monastic. You can fill in the blanks, and there's always a reason why we would want to. And so thinking about that and trying to unravel this attitude in myself, uh, came to the conclusion that this attitude is really a trap. That this attitude is the breeding ground for some things that I don't want for myself. Arrogance being one of them. For complacency, thinking that, because that I have arrived or some point in my life where I don't need to go any further, where I don't need to challenge myself. And also this harmony with others, sort of creating some kind of an uneven ground, where others are treated on the basis of whether or not they respect any of my identities. And I could see how that would cloud my judgment and jeopardize ultimately my ethical conduct, which is kind of the more perilous, the peril in that attitude. And it leads to disappointment, completely leads to disappointment and sometimes expectations in relationships that cannot be fulfilled for one reason or another. And I wanted to change that. I wanted to not make my interactions uh, be tainted by the expectation of others showing me respect. And as I was drawn back to this example of this beautiful example of this very wise abbess, what this was telling me is that it's more important to show respect to others than to expect or demand that for myself. And why? Why is that? So I've already said earlier what I identified as a disadvantage of that attitude. So now then I wanted to go into what are the benefits of doing the opposite, of instead focusing on respecting others and noticing that when I do that, I feel good about myself. When I show respect to others, it immediately leads to a calm mind. I'm focusing on others and not on myself. That diminishes my self-centered attitude. And I have an opportunity to practice humility. I have the opportunity of benefiting the other person, just like this abbess was doing. Um, and I have no regrets, because I remember times when I have been disrespectful, even if it's just mentally. There's a lot of regret and ill feelings that accumulate in the mind as a result of that. So it actually brings more joy to focus on showing respect than on being respected. And when I treat others with respect, when we treat others with respect, it is more likely that we're going to get the same thing in return. So we're already sort of creating the conditions for, for that. And then going back to what the abbess said, if I show him respect, he will learn to respect himself. And and it's just a very simple phrase, but there is again so much wisdom and compassion in that attitude and in that expression. She was leading by example. You know? This is what I believe, and therefore this is how I act. And I don't need to say it. I just display that in how I move, how I interact with others. And she was also saying that it was important, even beyond respecting others, that it was important to respect ourselves. I think that was also part of that bottom line of what she was trying to convey. Why is it important? Why would it be important for this junior monk to respect himself? And why is it important for her that he do that? First of all, I think because when a monastic, or when someone respects themselves, they are more likely to act according to their values. And if you're a monastic, then you're more likely to uphold the Buddha's doctrine, because that's part of the values that you're holding. So this abbess was really thinking long term. She was just not focused on that one instance of having to walk behind somebody junior than her, but she was thinking, if I do that, if I show this young monastic respect, then he can really learn how to respect himself by upholding his values, upholding the Buddhist doctrine, becoming a proper vessel for the Dharma, and then sustaining and sharing that Dharma with others. And here is that big scope of what that young monastic could do, what a difference he could make in his own practice and the practice of others, just by this one opportunity, showing him respect, learning to respect himself. Then I began to focus on, okay, self-respect is important. It's the basis for how I hold on to my ethical values, how I try to identify my faults and transform my mind. Self-respect then is the foundation for engaging with others in an honest and non-harmful manner, and is how I do my best not to harm myself. At some point, way back when I was still demanding and expecting respect, it was obvious that I had kind of like a double, I have a contradictory notion. On the one hand, I was expecting that people respect me, and on the other hand, in the back of my mind, I was thinking, yeah, they need to respect me, but in order for me to respect them, they have to earn my respect. There was this notion of others have to earn my respect, but they have to respect me regardless of how I act and what I do. That's really a contradictory set of values. Yeah? So part of this is coming to the realization that all beings are worthy of respect, regardless of how they look, what they think, how they act. Simply because they exist, and simply because, just like me, they want happiness and they want to avoid suffering. And it's it's important to have a clear definition of what respect is. And I try to look at the different definitions that I found on the internet of respect, and they didn't quite sort of entirely met with my own thinking about it. So I think where I am now in terms of the definition of respect, the working definition of respect that I'm using, that I try to use in my practice, that's coming through, is that respect for me is engaging in all actions and in all interactions with kindness and consideration, always treating others the way that I would like to be treated. Regardless, treating others in this way, regardless of their socioeconomic status, their education, their profession, etc. Everyone deserves respect. And also our environment, I want to bring that in, because it sustains us and it sustains every other living being on this planet. So that's one example, that one, that one answer to the question that Venerable Children posed just packed so much for me, and it has caused a shift, really a shift that continues to bear fruit, and I'm very, very grateful.